What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Pod Scum. I am, of course, your host, Reckless Rex Ruger. Watching my back, as always, respect the mustache. That's the Freddie Mercury puppet. We're back with another incredible episode. It's what we do, kids, and we ain't about to change it now. Before we get into it, I'll address the proverbial elephant in the room. You're looking at the smoldering good looks, the luscious blonde rock star locks. I'll confirm for you that, yes, indeed, you are looking at the one and only that we know of, love child of one Diamond David Lee Roth. There you have it. I've divulged, I've shared, and now we can get down to brass tacks, which, as I said, another incredible episode with a bona fide legend, a return guest. A pleasure to have him back on. Can't wait for him to get in here and chop it up with him. Before that, you know my credo, the philosophy. If you have a podcast, you got to pimp it. The pimp hand is feeling mighty strong today, so I'm going to give you my obligatory promotional spiel. Make sure to tap into Pod Scum on Facebook. Our handle is Off the Couch Boxing and Pod Scum. Get myself mixed up sometimes. This is the burden of having two shows on one channel. It's a lot to shoulder. But for you pugilism fans, got you covered with Off the Couch Boxing. For you rock and metal maniacs, we got you covered here on Pod Scum. You can get information on both of my shows on that Facebook page. Again, the handle Off the Couch Boxing and Pod Scum. Same handle over on Instagram. If you want to check us out over there, please do so. Off the Couch Boxing and Pod Scum. Lo and behold, I've dumbed it down for you guys. I've dumbed it down for myself. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the motto. But most importantly, Facebook, Instagram, amazing platforms. Do a lot of promoting, a lot of reels on Instagram, a lot of fun stuff. Other than promoting the shows, lots of cool stuff on Facebook. If it's happening in the fight world or in the rock world, I try to put up cool stuff. If it's newsworthy, if it's noteworthy, comes to my attention, I think you guys might want to be in the loop about it. I share it on there. So get with us on there. Both those platforms are great. But should you want to watch and listen to the entire episode, the full conversation, right here on our YouTube channel is where you need to be. So if you're here watching me, watching you, watching me right now, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and the most critical of the steps, find that notification bell in the upper regions of your screen and smash it, as the kids say these days. This way, you will be in the loop when new content drops. You know how we roll. Your boy Rexx got something new for you every single week. At least one episode, sometimes more, depending on how fruitful our week has been. And of course, if you see me texting and conferring with my guests, I won't edit that part out because you guys know I don't edit. Too old for that shit. My guest is here. We can get down to it. I'm happy to have him. I'm excited. You're excited. Let's get down to it, man, with another great episode with the legendary JJ French. Hello, JJ.
Hey.
Great to have you on here, man. Thanks for doing this, man. Really a pleasure, man.
Okay.
How are you?
You know, I'm good, man. I'm sitting here in Mexico and on a beach and having a great time.
Okay, JJ, rub it in. I'm in upstate New York, but I will say winter seems to be coming to an end.
Well, you know, our wind chill factor is 82 degrees right now. So I know it makes you feel even worse. Yeah,
salt in the wounds, JJ. Salt in the wounds. You know how to do it like a true New Yorker.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah. Go fuck yourself. You know.
Yeah, that makes me feel right at home right there.
Yeah, well, you know, the British have a joke about New Yorkers that an Englishman gets lost in Manhattan and he walks up to a New Yorker and says, "Excuse me, my dear fellow, can you tell me where I can find the Empire State Building, or should I just go fuck myself?"
Right,
we're not that bad, man.
No, we're really not. We're really not, especially amongst ourselves, you know. You know, I think we know how to play nice with each other. But JJ, I've done so many of these, and I don't know if I asked you this the first time I had you on, but oftentimes musical artists seem to have that common backstory. Not everybody, but a lot of them, where they come from musical households, lots of records playing, maybe parents that are into music or musicians themselves. Was any of this the case for you?
Yeah, my parents had a hi-fi in the living room, and they listened to Perry Como and the Weavers, and uh, my father was a classical music fanatic, loved it. My brother played guitar, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I played guitar. Was I just wanted, like, my brother was 10 years older than me, and
Yeah.
I wanted to emulate him or something, you know, and I thought I'll learn how to play guitar. So that was kind of the catalyst behind it. But then when I was 10 years old, the camp I was going to that summer, there was a camp counselor that taught guitar. So I took guitar lessons from him.
Was there ever going to be another instrument, or was it the guitar right out of the gate?
No, it was just the guitar. And I'll tell you what, interesting thing, because when the Beatles hit a year later, you know, and every musician that you could interview of my age would say, well, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I wanted,
Right.
you know, that's what I wanted to do. I mean, that's cliche, right? That's just cliche.
Right.
But I never wanted, but the interesting thing was I didn't care about playing Beatles songs on the guitar. I never bothered to learn them. I didn't want to know them. And I didn't seriously play guitar for I played bass for a couple of years. Well, it's actually funny. I joined a band. The first band I ever joined, I was 13, and it was me and a drummer named Paul Herman and a Chinese kid from the projects across the street from me named Bing Gong. That was his name, Bing Gong. So my name was John. So we called the band John, Paul, and Bingo.
Nice.
And we played one show, and we played a Battle of the Bands in junior high school. And we did two songs. We did Like a Rolling Stone. This is 1965, remember?
Right.
Which had just come out. And we did a song by a group called the Fugs. I don't know if you know who the Fugs are, but
Sure.
they're a super underground New York band, and they did a song called I Couldn't Get High. So I did the song, but for a 13-year-old kid to do a song called I Couldn't Get High did not exactly make the guidance counselors too happy, so they threw us off the stage. And we were blown away anyway by a band called the Bats. And the Bats became the local legend band in the neighborhood, and I joined the Bats as a bass player. But nothing serious really happened for the next couple of years. I messed around with a couple of other local bands, but then the real change was listening to the Paul Butterfield Blues Band and hearing a guitar player named Mike Bloomfield. That was really the catalyst. When I heard him play his guitar on a song called Blues with a Feeling, I had to know what that was. I had to know how to do that. Like I became obsessed with how to do that. That really became it. And in those days when you wanted to learn a guitar part, you know, today, of course, you just hit a button on whatever you're streaming or whatever. Back in those days, you had to lift the tone arm up and you had to bring it back and you had to play it, and you had to lift the tone arm and you had to play it. And you did this over and over again. You were wearing out the record, and eventually you wore the record out. So you put a nickel or a dime and you taped it to the top of the tone arm so it wouldn't skip off the record. It sounds so sounds like Fred Flintstone, you know what I mean?
Antiquated now. Yeah.
It's so antiquated, you know, but so it was learning the guitar solo from Blues with a Feeling. And then in very short order, I got mononucleosis. I was home from school. I got a bad case of mononucleosis, and I was home for 6 weeks, and I was kind of going crazy. And I said to my dad, you know, you got to buy me 3 records. You got to buy me Albert King's Born Under a Bad Sign. You have to buy me Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton, and buy me, I think, East West by Paul Butterfield, the follow-up album. So this was 1967. Shortly before I had gotten mono, however, I bought a Fender Telecaster with the money I made from dealing drugs, which is why I was dealing drugs at the time, so I could have money to buy guitars and amps. And I wasn't trying to become, you know, the Jalisco cartel. I was just trying to finance my own rock and roll dreams.
Sure. Trying to make a little scratch.
I was dealing weed. I was dealing weed before anybody was dealing weed. Now everybody's selling weed. You can buy it on my corner legally. I told you 55 years ago to do it. You didn't pay attention to me.
I know.
So I bought a Fender Telecaster, and here the bottom line was I was home for 6 weeks. And I was able to listen to those records, right, over and over and over again, because I wasn't doing schoolwork. And I basically taught myself how to play guitar. And when I emerged from my sick bed after 6 weeks of mono, I was a quote guitar player, which meant I knew enough to hang out with other guitar players, not embarrass myself, and learn licks. Because in those days, that's how you learned guitar licks. You
Right.
would hang out with other guitar players, and there was millions of them in those days. Everyone played guitar, and you'd hang out in Central Park, and one guy would have a guitar, and he'd say, "I can play the solo to this song," and you go, "How do you do that?" And that's how we kind of learned how to play.
And did you have, because it sounds like your parents were first of all, nothing's more rock and roll than funding your first guitar, fucking selling drugs. That right there is rock and roll to the core. But your father sounds really cool in going out and buying you the albums. But when it comes time to tell them that you want to be a musician, oftentimes when you get into the arts, it's very speculative, and maybe parents aren't so jazzed up about it. What did they think?
Well, they didn't know me as a musician. They just knew me as a drug dealing hippie drug addict.
Right.
I don't think they thought about me as a musician as much as they were wondering if I was going to get killed in a drug deal.
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
And I'm serious. Remember, this is 1967, 68. This is the hippie culture.
Yeah.
And it's not, the hippie culture then in New York City was massive, which means that all the kids my age were in the same boat. And all the parents were concerned for the same reasons.
Yeah.
And we all had the luxury of expressing our rock and roll dreams because we all played in bands, right? We were all jamming all the time. And then you could go to the Fillmore East on any weekend and see your heroes. And it sounds so ridiculous now to talk about it because people go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did this." But this is just how life was.
Yep.
You know, in those days, you just go to the Fillmore every weekend and you saw whatever was there. Who's ever headlining? Jimi Hendrix is headlining, Led Zeppelin's headlining, Rod Stewart's headlining, Jeff Beck is headlining, 10 years after is headlining, Jethro Tull is headlining, Janis Joplin, The Grateful Dead. Every weekend, The Who, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I can go on and on and on and on, and it'll make people sick because they'll go, "You could do that every weekend?" And I go,
Right.
"Yeah, you could do it every weekend. And by the way, during the week, you could do it during the week too, because during the week, those same bands played the Schaefer Music Festival in Central Park. So you could see them on the weekends at the Fillmore for $3,
Yep.
or you could see them in Central Park for $1.50. Do you understand this?
Yeah.
For $1 or $1.50. You could go see Led Zeppelin for $1.50, right?
Yep.
In 1969, I saw Zeppelin 4 times. I saw him the first time I paid $5, the second time I paid $5. That's front row seats at the Fillmore. The third time I paid $1.50, and the fourth time I paid $4 at the Pavilion in Queens. That's what you did. You know, the Rolling Stones were the only band. The Rolling Stones and Hendrix were the only artists at that point to play the Madison Square Garden. Everybody else was playing clubs and theaters.
Yeah.
When you're playing in clubs and theaters, you're that close, you know, to your idol.
Intimate.
So,
Yeah.
so you walk into a club like Ungano's or Steve Paul's Scene, which you probably don't know either one of them. These were 100-seat clubs,
Yep.
2 tiny clubs in New York. On any given night, you would walk into these clubs and you'd see Muddy Waters, or you'd see the MC5, or you'd see Steppenwolf, or you would see Leslie Weston Mountain, or you would see Eric Clapton, and you would see Blind Faith, and they're all playing 10 feet from you, okay? For like the cost of a couple of drinks. And that's the beauty of the era that I came out of.
Yeah.
And that was the beauty of living in Manhattan at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was incredible.
Is there a couple of players, guitar players that immediately come to mind, you know, who maybe around the time when you were starting, you were really studying a lot, really into maybe poaching some stuff from, you know,
Well,
really
yeah.
honing your style?
First, Chuck Berry, number one.
Yeah.
Learning the Chuck Berry songbook was super important. All right. Then learning Albert King's guitar style, more so than B.B. King. For me, Albert was a much tougher player.
Yeah.
Clapton, Blues Breakers, every guitar player my age talks about the same. You ask Joe Bonamassa, you ask all these guys, they'll all tell you the Blues Breakers album. But you know why? Because Clapton took a Les Paul and married it to a Marshall amp and overdrive and created a sound that never existed. Okay?
Yep.
Jimi Hendrix took a Stratocaster, played it through a Marshall, and created a sound that never existed. Okay.
Yep.
Leslie West took a Les Paul Jr. and plugged it through two gigantic Sun amplifiers and created a sustain that never existed before he did this. So we're all watching the beginnings. We're watching the beginnings of all of this, right? This is the beginnings of the culture that we are now still emulating and
Yep.
trying to, that we wax so romantic about. So when I tell my story to people, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. The truth is, I wasn't the only one experiencing things. The hundreds of thousands of people were experiencing this.
Yeah.
This was a generational experience. The Phil Maurice held 2,500 people, which means there were 2,490 people seeing the same thing I was seeing.
Yep.
Right, every single weekend, and the Schaefer Festival in the park was sold out every night because in the summertime, I'll tell you why, $1 and $1.50. If you went to the Schaefer Festival, which was the Wallman Rink on Central Park South, if you went there because Led Zeppelin was playing there, or the Chambers Brothers was playing there, or Jimi Hendrix was playing there, or whatever, and it was sold out, guess what? You sat outside. And the only difference is that there's like a fence between you. The volume is still the volume.
Right.
You're still hearing the artist. There was no separation there. This was so, to put it this way, if you were a musician in those days and you really wanted to, and you loved rock music and you wanted to advance your craft, your idols were playing every week.
Right.
And you could go see them every week. I mean, you could just, they were just accessible. I mean, Jeff Beck, I saw Jeff Beck's Rod Stewart's first show. I saw the Allman Brothers' first show. I saw Zeppelin's first show. I saw, I have, one day I was going through my record collection and I was thinking, how many concerts did I go to that were made into live albums? Because if a concert was made into a live album, that means it's a special concert, right? That must be special.
Yeah.
So I've got 19 albums of live shows that I attended as a fan. So I'll give you an idea.
Yeah.
That's
incredible.
Now, 8 of them were Grateful Dead shows, and my joke about the Grateful Dead is that they say nothing is certain except death and taxes. But I have another thing to add. Nothing is certain except death, taxes, and that every Grateful Dead show ever played live will be released on an album someday.
Yeah. All those are potential live albums. Yeah.
Because there's thousands of them, right?
Yeah. They're never
And I saw them like 27 times in the first 3 years. I saw Allman Brothers open for the Grateful Dead. The first show the Allmans ever played in New York. I saw them.
Yeah. What an incredible history.
It's when I tell the story, it sounds mind-blowing. But when I'm talking to people who are my age who lived in New York, it's the same story.
Right.
So it's not mind-blowing. It's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I was there. I saw that show. What? You didn't see? Which night were you there? The Friday night or the Saturday night show? That's how we get into it. Were you at the early show or the late show? Not like I saw something as an opening band. Like, well, which one of the 4 concerts did you see that weekend as an opening band? Did you see the early show or the late show?
Right.
Imagine the luxury of having that kind of a conversation.
Incredible. Yeah.
And when I saw the Dead, so my wife gave me a T-shirt many years ago. It says, "I'm so old, I saw Led Zeppelin on stage." Right? That's the T-shirt. Yeah. And I said, "Honey, that's really not. It should be, I'm so old, I saw the Grateful Dead as an opening band." That's how old I am.
That's old. Yeah.
So I saw the Dead open.
Yeah.
For Country Joe and the Fish, and I saw the Dead open for Janis Joplin. And many years later, I met Bob Weir. And we're sitting down talking, and he couldn't believe a guy in Twisted Sister was a deadhead, right? He couldn't believe it. But I told him, I saw you guys 27 times from 1968 to 1972. I saw every show they played in New York in those 4 years. I saw them with Pigpen 27 times. I'm sorry for all the Grateful Dead heads out there who talk about cred. I saw them with Pigpen 27 times, motherfucker. Don't talk to me about what your Grateful Dead cred is.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Jerry Garcia gave me a tab of acid at the Fillmore East, motherfucker. So don't talk to me about Grateful Dead cred. Yeah. I've got cred. Okay, so I'm talking to Bob Weir, and I said, Bob, I saw you guys open for Janis Joplin, and I saw you guys open for Country Joe and the Fish, and both times was disappointing because you only played like 40 minutes. And nobody can imagine the Grateful Dead playing for 40 minutes, correct? You can't imagine that.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
The Dead play 6 hours.
Yeah.
But as an opening band, they played 40 minutes. And of course, it was the first time I saw them, so I didn't know what to expect. I read about these shows in San Francisco. I read that they did 6-hour shows. So I'm expecting, I didn't know what I was expecting because the bill said Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead, and obviously the Dead can't be playing 6 hours if it's a double bill, right? They can't.
Right.
So I don't, and they're not headlining, so I didn't know what to expect. But the bottom line was they played 40 minutes. And I said to Bob Weir, I think my memory is you came out, you tuned up, and you said goodnight.
Yeah.
and he laughed. And he said, you're probably right. And I said, no, I think what happened was you came out the first time, you tuned up, because, they just would walk out on stage, like very like whatever, they tuned up. And I think the first time they went into St. Stephen, and then they said goodnight. Like that was it. That was the first Dead show.
Yeah.
Then the second Dead show, I think they played China Cat Sunflower, right? That was it. And the fact that he said sounds about right was really funny. It means he appreciated the limitations they had.
Right. And of course, their songs could turn into jam sessions that one song could be 40 minutes.
Well, it could make Freebird sound like a 3-minute single.
Right.
I mean, they could go on. Yeah, when they used to do Dark Star into Love Light, that shit would just go on. For like an hour, 2 hours, whatever. And I lived that. I lived through that. So look, it was an embarrassment of riches. So to get back to your whole point of what was the instigating factor of me becoming a musician, it was being at the right place at the right time, with the right passion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And now, great story about meeting Bob Weir. But because you've traveled the world and been doing this for so long, I want to ask. Certainly, Bob Weir is a fantastic meetup. But are there any other encounters that you've had with artists that you've looked up to that have really blown your mind, where you're kind of in your head like, "Wow, I can't believe I just fucking met that guy."
Well, let's put it this way. Before I became a professional musician and then a manager of a very professional and successful band, I used to crave meeting famous artists and people and all. I used to crave it. I used to crave celebrity. I used to crave me being a celebrity. And I used to crave meeting other celebrities. I can honestly tell you that I don't give a fuck about any musician.
That's probably healthy.
Any more than anybody else. Like they're just, I've met some nice guys. I've met some idiots. They should never meet your heroes. Trust me. When I say to people, you may love Sinatra, but you don't want to work for Sinatra. You may love Streisand, but guarantee you don't want to work for Barbara Streisand.
Right.
So, all the professionals that I know in the business who I like genuinely as people, like people who I like a lot, who have been in the business for years, and we have these conversations, who have you met, who do you like, who you don't like, whatever. And it's remarkable how much they work intimately with all the top artists in the world. And it's remarkable how much they go, nah, not a nice person. Nah, just really not nice. I don't like, I heard some crazy shit about Prince. I had a security guard that worked for Prince. He told me stories about Prince that were so nauseating that I think if I ever experienced it, I would just throw up. I don't need the bullshit. So if the question is there someone who I've not met who I would like to talk to? Yeah, because I write a Beatle column, or I have written a Beatle column, and I never interviewed Ringo and I never interviewed Paul. But then again, I'm thinking to myself, what would I possibly say that they haven't been asked, that just won't have them rolling their eyes going, do I have to answer this fucking question again?
This again? Yeah.
And, and I've thought about it, and I do have some questions that may be unique enough. Like, I would think I would say to Paul or Ringo, you guys have this reputation. You play at the Cavern Club 8 hours a night. I said, no one fucking plays 8 hours a night. Don't give me that bullshit. You played 3 songs, you took a break. You played 4 songs, you took a break. You went outside, you smoked a cigarette, you got a blowjob. You did something else, you took a break. You went outside, you got drunk. You came back, you hung out with your friends, you did some methamphetamine. You came back, like you didn't fucking play 8 hours a night. Like it's just bullshit. Like it's just that kind of mythology. It's like when people ask me with Twisted Sister, and I say I played 9,000 shows. How the fuck can you play 9,000? I said, it was very simple. We played 5 shows a night, 6 nights a week. And think about that, it's 30 shows a month. You want to multiply that. And I don't say nights, I say performances, because each set was a stage close change, all different songs.
Right.
So we perform 5. They go, well, that's not fucking fair, man. You just played you 5 nights. That's just one set. I said, really? I said, if that's the case, then why is it when bands, famous bands, Beatles, Stones, who, whatever, and they write their diaries of the shows they played, if they play one TV show one day, which they played one song for 3 minutes, they count that as a performance.
Sure.
Okay? So if they spent their day getting to the TV studio to play that one song, and that's a show, then why isn't my 8 songs in 40 minutes times 5 shows?
Right.
Okay. So if you're going to add that, so I do. Now, if I added just the nights, I think I added the nights. I think we played, by the time we retired in 2016, I think we played purely 3,200 isolated days of performing music. But if you add the shows that we played, the multiple shows we played, right, in all of that, not to mention the recording sessions, not to mention the rehearsals. You know what they say, 10,000 hours?
Right.
Okay, well, in the 10 years we played prior to us signing our record deal, we played something like 7,500 sets. All right. Now, if I was to distill each one on by the minute, including how long it took to get to the venue, staying there all night and getting home at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you want to put that up against the Beatles doing 8 hours a night, for a couple of years in Hamburg, I'm sorry, but it's not even close, motherfucker. Like, we beat them, and that's not even the point. I'm not trying to say we're bad. It has nothing to do with it. Everybody gets good in their own time, and the Beatles are the greatest bands in the world, so I'm not trying to equate it. What I'm trying to say is that if I had to think of something original to say to them, it would be like, take me through a real day. Just take me through a real day. What time did you get to the club?
Right.
What time did you actually start to play at the club? How many songs did you play on a given night at the club?
Right. A timeline.
What was it like the first night you ever played your first original? Were you nervous? Like we were the first night we ever played an original song.
Yeah.
I said, because you were a copy band, which they were. They were a cover band. So I would say, you were a cover band, right? So you did Buddy Holly, you did the Everly Brothers, you did all this shit, some really like crazy old band stuff, and Hoagie Carmichael, which is what they did. So what was it like? What was the first original, and were you nervous? I've never seen an interview where somebody's asked them that question. So
yeah.
Well, maybe I would ask them that question. As far as anybody else, look, I tell a long story about Jimmy. Well, Johnny Cash, let's tell that. Johnny Cash came to get our autograph one night. That was one of the best stories ever. Johnny Cash came to Toronto, Canada to meet us. And of course, that sounds crazy. Like, why would Johnny Cash?
Right.
Why would Johnny Cash do that? Right. So we're on tour with Iron Maiden, and we're playing at the Maple Leaf Gardens, and the guys are getting ready in the dressing room, and they're having an argument, and I just want to get out of the dressing room, so I'm sitting outside the dressing room, sitting on a Zamboni machine, because it's it's the Maple Leaf Gardens, it's hockey, right?
Yep.
I'm sitting on a Zamboni machine reading a New York Times, and I hear this guy go, I hear, do you all know Rockefeller Twisted Sister? And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, that sounds just like Johnny Cash. I look up, it's Johnny Cash, and I'm like, that's me. And he goes, well, I came to get your autograph, and I said, what? He said, well, I need your autograph for my son, John Jr. He's a huge fan, and I brought a photographer up to prove I met you. And like, you know how surreal that shit is? That is
crazy.
Crazy. So I go in the dressing room and I go, Johnny Cash is outside. He wants to come in. And they're like, get the fuck out. Like, they're like, yeah, he's not. I said, $1,000. I'll bet you all $1,000. So they all figure, well, I don't want to lose $1,000. So I bring Johnny in. So I have a photo of us with Johnny. So Johnny's in, and we're signing shit. He's signing shit. And we're all in awe, like just in awe,
That's incredible.
And he goes, my son loves your band. And then he says, y'all play in Nashville? And I said, probably in a couple of months. He goes, y'all call me, all right? I'll come down the show. And I said, what's your phone number? He says, you just look up in the directory at House of Cash. And I said, for real? He says, yeah, just call the House of Cash. So we get to Nashville in February, and I'm at the Hilton, and I call up information, and I get a phone number for House of Cash. And I call it, and a woman answers, and she said, "House of Cash." And I said, "Is this a loan company?" Like this was a little weird to me. I said, are you a bank, or does Johnny Cash live there?" She goes, "It's a Johnny Cash museum, sweetheart." It was his mom.
Wow.
Okay, it was his mother. So I said, "Is Johnny in town?" She goes, I don't know." I said, "Well, can you give him a message if you see him?" They said, "All right." I said, "Well, you tell him JJ French and Twisted Sister is in town. We're playing tomorrow night. I'm at the Hilton. So call me." So the next morning, the phone rings at 8 a.m. I'm thinking it's my wife. I pick up the phone and go, "Hi." And the guy goes, "Hi, JJ, it's Johnny Cash." I almost fall off the fucking bed. Like, "Johnny." And he goes, "Y'all playing at the arena tonight?" "Yeah." "Can you put me and Waylon on the guest list?" Now, I'm saying to myself,
Wow.
put you and Waylon? Like, don't you guys just show up? I mean, it's fucking Nashville. It's like bringing a Mayflower Madam to Vegas. Does she have to show her
Right.
proof?
Right. Yeah. Who doesn't let those two in? Right.
I mean, they're fucking legends, man. Like, I went, sure, no problem. So, we put Waylon and Johnny and they all came down. The Carter family, the whole Carter family came down, and
Wow.
and June Carter says, "Y'all got to come over tomorrow for lunch." And I said, "We can't. We're on a tour. We got to leave." She goes, "Yeah, I got to come back." Okay, great. And so that was amazing, right? And then my wife, a couple months later, calls me and says to me, "I just watched Johnny Cash on the Today Show, and Brian Gumbel asked him at the end of the interview, who does he like listening to these days? And he says the Rolling Stones and Twisted Sister."
That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy.
So so those are like the nice moments. Okay.
Yeah.
There were some scummy ones which I won't get into, but that was a nice one. That was a real nice one.
Well, being as that you were going along the lines of questioning hypothetically with Paul McCartney about asking him about nerves during live performances, given the fact that you put Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings smack dab in the front to watch you guys, is there added pressure? Can you recall back then, man? Now you're playing in front of two bona fide legends yourself?
No, because we put them on the guest list, and I'm assuming they would be brought backstage and be on the side of the stage or something. You know what I mean? Yeah, most of those people don't stand. They don't go to the front rows.
Or wherever they were. But are you nervous playing in front of them?
No, because the band had played thousands of shows, and nothing made us nervous anymore.
You passed it.
Yeah, you just you're professionals.
Yeah.
And we've done thousands of shows and sold millions of records. I mean, in the early days before we sold records, maybe I'd be more concerned. But once we were the multi-platinum Stay Hungry era, and we'd already done thousands of performances, performing it was an art for us. Like, and the connection was with the audience. We didn't play. We played to make an audience happy, like the totality of the night.
Right.
We became, I think, we were really good at mass audience. Well, I don't want to be cynical and say mass audience manipulation, but the truth is we really learned how to play to like millions of people, concert level, whether it was 1,000, 20,000, 100,000, 110,000, or whatever. With the art of performing, you come out of that head and you just do what you got to do. Even in a Super Bowl, once they start breaking a sweat, they're playing the game. They're nervous for the first 15 minutes,
right?
And then once you get hit, it's over. Now you got to get to the game plan, right?
Yeah, and even all that peripheral stuff happening around you is kind of blotted out. Even
because because you just get back to the job you got to do. It's like when the people who have seen photos of us in front of 100,000 people, like, "Oh man, that was amazing." And I go, "I guess it's amazing, but it was my job."
Right.
So therefore, after a while, it's not amazing anymore. It's not, don't get me wrong. It's wonderful to have 100,000 people singing "We're Not Going to Take It" back to you. It's always a thrill. But when you're comfortable in the arena of doing it, that's what you do for a living.
Right.
That's what you do. So I try not to be cynical about it. I try to be appreciative. But, if you ask anybody who's done something a million times, how they doing it, they're going to go, "I've been doing it a million times."
Yeah.
All
that. Yeah.
And that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So what am I doing?
Right. So I I want to get to the podcast. I want to get to the book. But before that, you mentioned the retirement in 2016. Given the fact that you did this for so long, do you still have an urge to do music on any level? Are there any projects rolling around in your head? Anything that you still want to get out creatively from the musical side?
There was obviously everybody knows the band disbanded. The band retired in 2016, and then we had a tour scheduled, and the tour had to be suspended because of Dee's health issues.
Sure.
So people are always asking me, how bad did you want to do it? Did you really want to do it? Did you really want to do it? How bad did you miss it? And do you play much? And the thing is, I played 2 years ago. I played at Jazz Fest in New Orleans.
Yeah.
I was a guest in the Devell Crawford's band and the drummer was the Rolling Stones drummer, Steve Jordan.
Wow.
So I played with Steve Jordan, and it was a gas. But I hadn't been on stage in 8 years, so here I am at in New Orleans. I had to be my own roadie because it was a throw and go, right? And so I didn't have a road crew or anything like that. And I said to Devell, I said, "You don't expect me to plug my amp in and tune my guitar up, do you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do."
Yeah.
I said, "You gotta be kidding me. I haven't plugged my own guitar in since Moby Dick was a minnow. Like what? Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yeah, man, you gotta tune." I said, "Let me understand this. You're telling me Steve Jordan from the Rolling Stones, who is a friend of yours, is gonna show up without a roadie, with a drum key, tune up his drums and play? That's what you're telling me? That Steve Jordan's gonna do that?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I went out on stage, I tuned up, I plugged into a Marshall half stack. Steve Jordan gets on the drums, he pulls out a drum key, he tunes up his drums.
Your own roadies.
I'm like, I went, "Hi, Steve, nice to meet you." He goes, "Hi, JJ, nice to meet you." I said, "Do you have any idea what songs we're playing?" He goes, "I have no fucking idea." He goes, "DeFell will just call them out." Because, these guys are all seasoned musicians, but I'm on stage with these guys, and I realized I'm probably older than all of them. I probably played more shows than all of them. I probably sold more records than all of them. So why am I nervous? Right. I hadn't been on stage in 8 years, and I had a great time. I had an amazing time doing it. So it's not without my desires. And here in Mexico, I have a guitar and an amp down here.
Yeah.
And every day I pick it up, make sure the fingers still move. I don't have arthritis in any of my joints.
Good.
I still have my knees. I still have my hips. I consider myself lucky, from that respect. I'm 73, and I every day keep getting a text from somebody that somebody else dies, which is sad.
Very.
Because the genre of music that we all love is sunsetting in terms of the creators.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
The music will live forever, but the actual creators are dying, or they're sick and can't play anymore. And every day another one drops. And when we were all 17, we didn't think that was going to happen.
Right. Invincible.
We were invincible at 17. No, nobody thought about this. But also, I think if you were to ask all the bands in 73 that were created in 73, Judas Priest, Kiss, Twisted, Aerosmith, are all from the class of 73. If you were to ask any one of us in 73 how long we were going to last, the answer would have been 5 years. That was the automatic answer, wasn't it?
Right.
5 years. I'll be together. We'll do it 5 years, or maybe 10, because I think the Beatles lasted 10. So maybe, because we're all Beatle fans, we would have said hopefully 10 years.
Right.
Do you think that any of us thought we'd be 50 years later, that anybody would care? I mean, that's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. You almost think, geez, am I even going to be alive, much less have that long of a career?
Mind-blowing to me. I mean, to think that, I saw Zeppelin 69, that's like 55 years ago. I mean, that's just, in fact, January 28th this year was the 56th anniversary of me seeing Zeppelin for the first time, like 56 years ago.
Crazy. That's crazy.
It was, and I didn't even go to see Zeppelin. I was doing a dope deal that night, and I had 5 pounds of pot in a shopping bag, and the guy was supposed to meet me under the marquee of the Fillmore East, and it was freezing cold. It was January 28th, and he didn't show up, and I'm freezing. And someone said, "Hey, man, I got a front row seat for Iron Butterfly," was the headliner. And I figured, well, I'll go sit and listen to In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. I got 5 pounds of weed. I mean, how bad can that be? I'll smoke my way through fucking In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida.
Yeah.
And the opening act was this, because in those days, this is what Bill Graham did. He mixed up the acts, you know. So the opening act was a gospel group called Porter's Popular Preachers, and they sang, you know, If I Had a Hammer, and you know, all these gospel songs. And then Zeppelin came out and played the whole first album.
Yeah,
And
that's
we're
mind-blowing.
and we're like, what the fuck is that? Like,
Yeah,
I will never forget it. Like, it was just mind-fuckingly ridiculous. And then Butterfly came out, and compared to Zeppelin, even though Butterfly at that point had the biggest selling album in the history of Atlantic Records, the 2 million selling record.
right.
It was crazy. And then Zeppelin came back 6 months later and headlined the Fillmore. And you know who the opening act was for Led Zeppelin?
Oh,
The Woody Herman Jazz Orchestra.
wow.
And I have a poster of it with Woody Herman and his clarinet and Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's
Just
crazy.
to give you a
You're
little
literally
more.
witnessing history. I mean, you're right there at the precipice, at the beginning of rock and roll history.
Yeah, well, I saw the Who and Cream's first performance in New York at the Murray the K Easter show. People don't know who Murray the K is. He was a famous disc jockey.
Yep.
He was one of the most powerful disc jockeys in the music business, and he put on these shows every year, these Easter shows that usually took a whole week at the Brooklyn Fox Theater. He'd have all these rock and roll acts. Well, in 1967, it was called Music in the Fifth Dimension because psychedelic was coming in.
Yeah.
So he had a 10-band roster. Wilson Pickett, Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, the Young Rascals, the Blues Magoos, Simon and Garfunkel, a couple of people you never heard of, the Chicago Loop, and then at the bottom it said The Cream and the Who.
Yeah.
And The Cream and the Who each played 2 songs. Each. It turned out everybody played 2 songs, except the Young Rascals played 4 because they headlined that night and they had the #1 song in the country, Groovin'.
Yep.
Now, that 10-band review played for 90 minutes, okay? The 10 bands played for 90 minutes total, 7 times a day for 9 days. So that's 63 performances.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, in the Who's diary, they say we played 63 performances on Easter week in New York City because they played 2 songs a show 7 times a day or 9 times a day for 7 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Crazy.
So the Who did My Generation and I Can't Explain, and I think Cream did NSU and I Feel Free, and I met, you know, and so I'm a 14-year-old kid walking into this theater. This
Right.
is the first theater rock show I'd seen. I was 14 years old, and I'm sitting there, and my friend who took me was a fan of the Who and Cream. He had their singles from England. He knew them already, so he played me their music. And I remember Pete Townsend taking his guitar and smashing, you know, his amplifier.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, you know, so many years later, I'm thinking, how could they do that? How could he spend money doing that? Like, you know, how much money could they be making, right? Like how could he destroy his amp? Remember, I saw 1 show out of 9 that day that went on for 7 days. And many years later, I was on a panel with Roger Daltrey. And I said, I was at the Murray the K Easter shows in 1967 with you and Cream. He goes, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that was crazy. And I said, yeah, how could Pete, like, destroy that amp every night? He goes, how old were you? I said, 14. He goes, oh, you were just too young to know the trick. What's the trick? He goes, there was no speaker behind that. He goes, at that amplifier, at that point, the mesh had no speaker behind it. So he could just go over to that amp and go through it. And you thought he was breaking a speaker.
Yeah. A fugazi.
And he was doing nothing.
Right. Right.
That's how naive we all were.
Right. Right. But that's showmanship, though. That's showmanship.
No. Listen to me. It sounds so foreign and so I don't know what the word is. It sounds so distant in time, and it really is. I mean, it's 1967,
Right.
but that was the beginnings.
Yeah.
You know, up until the Fillmore opened, rock groups only appeared in these reviews, like Motown artists did. You know, the Temptations, the Supremes,
Right,
Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. They would
Yeah.
all go on those bus tours, right?
Yep.
That was the whole thing, the bus tours. All the rock groups were doing these these cavalcade of stars kind of business. And it was Bill Graham who said 3 bands, each band plays 45 minutes, like something like that. Or the first band plays 30 and the other 2 bands play an hour each. And you give people a real taste as to who you are. So you credit that with Bill Graham. Then when they moved the artists into Madison Square Garden, most people don't know this, but in the earliest days, the Garden opened in '68. The first group to play the Garden was Cream, and they played in the center of the Garden on a revolving stage. It looked like a giant Lazy Susan.
Yeah.
The problem was that the PA systems in those days were the public address systems on the ceiling for the hockey games.
Not good. Yeah.
So I asked Jack Bruce once what it was like. He said it was ridiculous. He said we had no fold-back monitors. The PA was way above our heads, and the amplifiers stretched across the entire stage. So as the stage turned, if you were sitting in front of the stage in one part of the arena and it turned away, you couldn't hear anything. So the only way you could hear it is if you got up and walked around the arena and stayed in front of the amp. Think about how crazy that is.
Right.
I have friends who saw me. They said, I saw you on the top tier, man. You're walking around. I said, well, why didn't they hear the damn band? So I went to see Jimi Hendrix, same deal. And so what happened was the Rolling Stones said, no fucking way. You stick us at the end of the arena and put a PA system there.
Yeah.
The Stones were the first band to actually create the template for arena that we all know.
Yeah.
And that was '69, and I was at all 3 Stones shows, including the matinee, which most people don't remember. The Stones play a 2:00 afternoon show at the Garden.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy to even think of rock bands, man. Because most of the time I think people think of rock bands as not even waking up till 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah. Well, maybe Keith did go to sleep the night before.
Right. Might have never been to bed, maybe.
Or he didn't go to sleep. But the Stones played 3 shows. Thanksgiving weekend '69, and by the way, the top ticket was $6.
Wow, never see those days again. Unbelievable. You can get a bottle of water for that now.
You can't get a piece of sushi for $6.
Right. Now I'm interested to get your take, man. You did something really amazing, man. I really enjoyed your book, and you didn't take the route of doing the tales of debauchery, the tawdry rock biography. You really did something smart, and I'm wondering where you conjured up the idea to Twisted Business Lessons from My Life in Rock and Roll. It really seems like it's speaking to how to build up your business acumen and be and have a savvy business mind in this industry. Is that an idea you came up with? Did someone approach you about that idea?
Well, I had a mentor, my writer, Steve, my co-writer. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was my mentor in my public speaking life. And let's see, do I have a copy? Here. Here's the book. Here's the book, right? So Steve Farber is my mentor, and I met him at a public speaking. I met him when he was doing a motivational speaking gig, and we became friends. He says, you should be a motivational speaker. So he got me into that world, and I do these conferences now, and I speak. But coming up with the twisted method of reinvention was a marketing concept from my standpoint.
Yeah.
Taking the word twisted, TWISTED, and turning each letter into a lesson.
Right.
Tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. And I gave examples. So the book is a blueprint for business and success in life. It's not about rock and roll.
Yeah.
Although rock is sexy for sure.
Yeah.
And you can wrap the stories around sexy stories about rock and roll because everybody wants to hear it. Sexy stories about rock and roll for sure.
Yeah.
But no, it's a business book is really what it is. And I speak to business groups all the time.
Yeah. I talk to so many young artists on here, and it seems like now more than ever, a book like this really does make sense because it is tough navigating nowadays. I mean, so many young bands, I don't think sometimes know where the jumping off point is, how to get any traction in the industry nowadays. Is this the kind of book that could be of assistance for artists that might not have read it yet?
Yeah, in a general sense, yes, because you have to be good, first of all, which
Sure.
applies to no matter what the situation is. You better be good. And I always say to people, before you're the Beatles, you better be better than the band next door. I mean, that's just like rule number one. How good are you as an act? But the mechanics of success are different today than they were when I was 20 years old. The mechanics of them, not the overarching aspect of it, which is work really hard, and develop relationships. That's always, consistent with everybody's other levels of success. But the pathway that you need to do today is not the pathway that I had.
Right.
The pathway that I had did no longer exist for you. The pathway that I had was the drinking age was 18, the clubs with thousands of nightclubs. Okay. You could rent a house for $300 a night. Gasoline was 30 cents a gallon.
Right.
A hotel room was $40 a night. You could rent a truck for $25 a week. You had guaranteed work of 6 nights a week in a club to learn your craft. You got paid $300 a night. If $300 a night times 6 is 1,800 times 4. That's like a lot of money. You could rent a house. You could run a business. You could create that world does not exist anymore. What exists now is the world of online promotion and social media.
Yep.
So what I say to young artists is, follow what other artists are doing that are in the world that you're in and see how they're doing it and follow. It's like being a copy band. We just copied the direction that all the bands were doing in our day and then improved on it.
Right.
Everybody improves on what's there before. So if you're seeing a band that's new that has a breakout hit, how did that happen? Follow that template. Because here's the truth. When I was 20, that's 1972, I never asked anybody for advice, but I could have asked musicians for advice because I live in Manhattan and there's a lot of professional musicians that lived in my building and in my neighborhood. And these guys were, they're doing jingles and they're on the Tonight Show. These are professional musicians who've had long careers. And I never asked them for advice. But if I did ask them for advice, they would have looked at me and said, John, I was born in 1902, and my first job was playing with a female singer in a hotel lounge in 1918, before World War I.
Right.
And he goes, that has nothing to do with wearing women's clothing and playing through Marshall Stacks in a nightclub owned by the mob. I'm sorry,
Right.
that's not the same pathway. And in a way, it sounds funny, but it's true.
Different recipe. Yeah.
Different recipe. The formula doesn't change. The recipe changes. The outcome is the same, which is success. The pathway I always say to people, look around. Look at what's around you. See how other people are doing it and figure. That's exactly what we did. We jumped in the club circuit. We said, how come that band's making 500 a night? We're making 300 a night. What is it? Is it the songs they're playing? Is it their light show? What is it exactly that's doing it? So we would copy that and we would get better. And we kept doing that and doing it over and over again. We kept aiming our sights for the next band up there. How do we snipe them? We were Twisted Sister was a predatory band. Our job was to beat you.
Right.
Not to hurt you, to beat you.
Right.
To win a night. If we had a chance to play with you, we would take your following.
Yeah.
That was what we would try to do. Why? Because it guaranteed we'd be more successful and we could play bigger clubs. Now,
Sure.
we had the luxury of clubs being gigantic. So we started out playing in clubs that were small, but then there were these clubs that held 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. Think about that. These were copy bars. These were not concert halls.
Right.
These were cover bands. So all the bands on our circuit learned how to be pros. So all the groups that came out of our circuit, we didn't call them tribute bands back then. They were just copy bands. And you had a band that did great Doors. You had a band that did great Pink Floyd. You had a band that did great Led Zeppelin. The best of all those bands were so good that you'd rather see them than the bands that they were covering.
Right.
Because the bands they were covering sucked live.
Right.
By the mid-70s, Zeppelin was terrible live. But Aerosmith was terrible live. And all these, I worship these bands, but they were terrible. They got worse. Zeppelin started out phenomenal and got worse. The Rolling Stones started out okay, then they got great with Mick Taylor, then they've just been horrible ever since.
Yeah.
So being better than these bands at their prime, if you concentrate on it, you will be better than they played because you care more. They don't give a shit.
Right.
The first time I went to see Aerosmith, I went to see Aerosmith with Ted Nugent. I didn't know Ted Nugent at all. I knew who the Amboy Dukes were. Didn't know Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent was mind blowing. And then Aerosmith came out, and at that point we were covering Aerosmith songs, and I couldn't understand a word. It was like listening to a Bob Dylan concert. It was like horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't say that with any great joy. None. We hired Dee because Dee could sing like Robert Plant. And Zeppelin was one of the greatest live acts in the world. But as time went on, they got worse and worse and worse. And the proof is all out there on YouTube. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's unknowing. What I am saying, though, is that the quality of some of the performances of these bands deteriorated so much that the copy bands were better. So if you want to hear great Zepp, go see Zebra play Zepp, because they did great. If you want to see Emerson, Lake and Palmer or Pink Floyd, watch Rat Race Choir or Jethro Tull or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, because they played it better than those bands played it.
Yeah.
In a club.
Yeah.
And it was a testament to the music. Number one, music is always great. And number two, that they cared enough, and these other bands almost like didn't care after a while. And that's how the club scene evolved, at least in the tri-state area. That was our world. However, while that world was going on, the CBGB's world was going on at the exact same time.
Yeah.
It was Blondie, Talking Heads, the Ramones, and those bands couldn't get arrested outside of Lower Manhattan. And we would never go into Lower Manhattan because our scene was like a copy band scene. It was like a class distinction between the two. Although I saw the Ramones in 1975 in an afternoon show at CBGB's, and they were great.
Yeah.
You knew right off the bat, like you just knew. Whereas they brought the Dolls out to play Hot Dog Beach in the Hamptons on a Sunday afternoon. Can you imagine the Dolls playing at 2 p.m. Beach club in the Hamptons?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Right. That's one of those. Right. That's one of those things where what's wrong with this picture type of deal right there.
It was just. Hold on. Let me just. Anyway. So I saw the Dolls play an afternoon matinee on the Hamptons beach, and it was sad.
Yeah, not a great
spot.
Yeah,
it was sad. It was just not. They didn't relate to the crowd. The crowd didn't relate to them. It was the wrong. The club shouldn't have brought them out, and they didn't do well.
When you have a book under your belt, does it inspire you to want to write more? Are there more books in JJ French?
Yeah, I just haven't gotten around to it. There's a lot. I mean, look, I do a podcast, the JJ French Connection.
Sure. Yep.
Which I love. I love the podcast. I mean, I have a lot of different people on it. It's, I haven't gotten into politics. I'm very political, but I've stayed away from it. But I'm probably going to start veering in towards it. I'm very opinionated when it comes to politics.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a very divisive world right now. Back in the '60s, when you had Woodstock, you had 400,000 people in a field, and everybody said the exact same thing.
Right. We
hate the war. We hate Nixon. Like everybody was in agreement.
Sure.
It was a mass agreement among young people. Everyone thought the same way. If the ones who didn't never really voiced it, but now you can't do that. Now everything is divided. If you say this group hates you, say that, this group hates you.
Yeah.
God forbid you should have an opinion. Then if you're a musician with an opinion, you should be so lucky. You should just play and shut the fuck up, man.
Right.
So in other words, you're a plumber and you can have an opinion. I play guitar, but I can't have an opinion, right? But you can. Look, I will say as a blanket statement, if you don't vote, then shut the fuck up. People died.
Agreed.
People died, so you have the right to vote, motherfucker. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, I don't care. People died to protect your right to vote. And if you don't vote, you know what? I have no respect for you. That's what I can tell you straight out.
Agreed.
Straight out. And while I was against the war, we did a USO tour, and every time I see a soldier on the street, I say, thank you for your service, because, that's what you chose to do. And I say, thank you, regardless of my political opinions on anything else. I thank them. I thank cops too. I thank people all the time. I go, thank you for service. You put your life on the line. Protect me. Thank you for your service. Twisted Sister reunited to play a benefit for the New York City Police, Fire Department, and Emergency Services workers following 9/11. That was the catalyst of the band returning. We did a benefit, us, Sebastian Bach, Anthrax, Ace Frehley, and Overkill.
Yeah.
And we did a benefit and raised $100,000 for New York City police, firemen, and emergency services workers. And that was one of the proudest moments of my life, because we did not do it to promote a record. We didn't do it to promote ourselves. We just said, we're New Yorkers. This shit happened in New York City. It was devastating, 9/11, and we're coming together for our people, because nobody who's from New York City did not know someone or knew someone who knew someone who died in 9/11.
Yeah, and what a great East Coast lineup that is too, man. What a show that is. I mean, amazing.
Well, you know what happened? The Garden, they had Springsteen and McCartney and Billy Joel, and we said, well, we're from New York. No one's more New York than Twisted.
Right.
I was born in Manhattan. Eddie was born in the Bronx. AJ was born in Staten Island. Dee and Mark were born in Queens. I'm sorry. That's a New York fucking band.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't want heavy metal. It's too aggressive. And I went, we're 3,000. You just lost 3,000 people. What do you mean? And so Eddie Trunk, you know, did his thing and put it together, and with Mike Piazza. And, and we did a great thing.
Yeah. And so I want to just ask your opinion, because again, I talked to so many musicians on here, and it is a weird time in music. You know, we're in the streaming era. You know, people aren't necessarily buying the physical product as much anymore. You know, artists are putting out singles, EPs, smaller bodies of work, oftentimes. Is there a way the industry, because I hear the same story from artists all the time, how the streaming platforms just don't really get these artists paid. They got to be out there slogging on the road, selling T-shirts, you know, trying to make ends meet wherever they can. Could the industry have gotten in on the streaming thing and harnessed it in a way where it could have been more profitable for the artists? How did they miss the boat on it? Do you have a theory on it?
Well, first of all, the artist never made a penny on bootlegging, and that happened like crazy. So when people talk about no one's getting paid, at least people are getting paid now.
Right.
Because everybody does pay for a service. Everyone does. So money does come in. Back in the old days, you were losing a fortune.
Yeah.
On bootlegs. You were losing a fortune on record labels ripping you off, because there was no guarantee that whatever they were selling, you could actually prove.
Right.
Now every track is logged by computer. You know, there's two sides to look. There's two sides to this situation. All right, there really are two sides. The record industry is a criminal organization.
Yeah.
They screw artists left, right, and sideways. They always have, and so, you know, so what? Artists are going to get screwed some way, somehow. Trying to figure out a way to divide that penny up so that people get paid is certainly difficult. And sure, the royalty rates need to be improved. But the fact that artists never get paid for radio play, let's talk about that. You know, terrestrial radio doesn't pay an artist a cent. There was a story in the New York Times several years ago. It was a headline. We all in the business knew that this was not a secret. It said, Aretha Franklin's Respect played 7 million times on radio. Aretha Franklin's income from those 7 million, zero.
Wow.
Well, that's because performing rights societies, ASCAP and BMI, and the publishers colluded with Congress 70 years ago and said performing rights societies, we shouldn't pay the artist. The artist can go and tour and sell records. You know, we don't, and we're promoting them by playing it on the radio. We're helping them. We shouldn't pay them. And so terrestrial radio has never paid a cent.
Right.
And then on top of that, when you go to an arena to watch a hockey game, baseball game, football game, and you hear a song like "We're Not Going to Take It," a friend of mine goes, "Yo, dude, Giant Stadium, we're not going to take it." Ka-ching. I go, "Yo, dude, we're not going to take it." Zero.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I said they pay ASCAP BMI fees to play 1 billion songs, and they don't have to pay us a penny. The publisher gets paid. Okay, the publisher gets paid. The artist gets paid nothing. That's just the way it works. Now, Sound Exchange has flipped that around, and online has flipped that around. Now all that gets logged, and now we get paid. But for the longest time, the artist never got paid. Just the writer got paid.
Yeah.
Now with Sound Exchange, the artist gets paid, the label gets paid, and the publisher and the writer get paid zero. So
Wow.
that's the attempt at trying to reconcile it. And I'm not telling you anything is perfect.
For sure.
Because nothing is perfect.
Granted.
And it could always be better. But just remember, in those days, you made money selling records and you lost money touring.
Right.
Now you make money touring and you give your music away for free.
Pretty much.
Which is why tickets cost so much.
Yep.
Because in the old days, the record sales theoretically were buoying the whole business and helping you out. What I want to know, and no one's ever answered this question for me, is what's the first band that had tour support? And there's got to be an answer. I don't know who that first band was to get tour support. Was it the Beatles? Was it Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas? Was it, who was the first act to ever get tour support? I don't know the answer to that, but I also will tell you something funny, and then I'm gonna have to go. But
Yeah.
I met Sid Bernstein, who produced the Beatles at Shea Stadium. I met him many years ago, and I said, was there a backstage writer for the Beatles at Shea? I mean, this is the first time that a band ever played was there a backstage writer? And he said that Brian Epstein had sent him a telegram or a telex asking for the following items to be in the dressing room. And he tells me what these items are. And I have to tell you, it makes me laugh at how primitive the world was back in '64.
Yeah.
So it said, please provide the following items: 4 towels, 4 cots, and a 6-pack of Coca-Cola, one for each Beatle and one for Neil and Mal, the 2 roadies. That was it.
Wow.
That's what he told me. If that is true, look where we are now. You have roast beef flown in from a farm in fucking Paducah,
Right.
whatever. Flowers have to be brought in from, daffodils have to be brought in from Holland.
Yeah.
White begonias have to be set up in the room. Like, think
Yeah.
about where it's come to
I know.
and where
Yeah.
it started from.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
That's
interesting.
crazy. That's crazy. So before I let you out of here, if people want to tap into what you're doing, what you've got going on, I know everyone's on social media somewhere. Where's the best place to keep tabs on what you're doing?
Always jjfrench.com is
Sure.
always the way to do it. You can email me if you have any questions at askjjts, ask jjjyjyts, at gmail.com. You can contact me there.
Okay.
My book, Twisted Business, is not only available online, but you can get the audiobook.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
makes
Yes.
it really easy. Get the audiobook, and that way you can just, as you're driving around, I can feed you all my words of wisdom.
And where can people find the podcast?
Oh, well, the podcast is on Spotify, Apple, all the normal platforms.
Okay.
And I try to keep different new guests. In fact, I'm supposed to, believe it or not, have Zach Starkey on next week, which
Okay.
which would be a lot of fun. Maybe I'll ask Zach, did your father ever tell you what he did back in the bars back, in 1962?
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
It's great having those conversations, man. You know what I mean? Because I think people really love being a fly on the wall, man. I find myself drawn to the podcast too, and just hearing a couple of guys chopping it up about stuff that I'm interested in. It really does have a place in today's world. It really does. It's great to see the art of conversation kept alive.
Well, hopefully when I talk to these people, they tell me something that's interesting.
Yes.
The worst thing you can have is a boring guest.
Right.
Who gives you nothing. I'd rather tell a guy to back off and shut up than try to get something out of him. If they go, no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
That kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, you were certainly not that guest. Listen, great stories, man. I really enjoyed talking to you. A pleasure, man. And keep in touch, man. I'd love to have you on again, man. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, JJ. Thanks for doing it, brother.
Take care.
All right. Later, my friend. There he goes, folks. The legendary JJ French, guitarist for Twisted Sister, author, podcaster, does a little bit of it all these days. You can check out his podcast, the JJ French Connection, as we were just talking about, on all the platforms. Check out his book, a very interesting book called Twisted Business, Lessons from My Life in Rock and Roll. Not your typical tawdry tales of debauchery, sex, drugs, rock and roll that you typically get out of rock biographies. This one really tackles a lot of the business side, marketing, some savvy pointers and tips for new musicians or just people that want to have a better frame of mind when it comes to business. I'll put it at that. I don't want to pigeonhole it into just musicians or just artists just because it was written by JJ. Something in there I think that can benefit everybody. So check out his book. And again, get over to his social media platforms. And of course, he has left behind an amazing body of work in the form of the legendary Twisted Sister, who unfortunately, as he said, had some tours or some tour dates planned. Unfortunately, due to health issues with Dee Snider. They were not able to continue forward with those plans, but man, have they given us some fucking great music. And as JJ said earlier, the music, it'll always be there. It'll stand the test of time. They are really one of the true fucking great rock and roll bands, New Yorkers through and through, as JJ said. So listen, the music, it'll always be there. Fucking great songs, anthems. So again, really appreciate JJ being on here. Truly a legend. Check out his book, check out the podcast, and continue to check us out. I'll give you the 411 one more time on how to get with us. Tap in with us on Facebook, Off the Couch Boxing and PodScum. Don't be confused. I got 2 shows, 1 Facebook page. That's our handle. Check us out on Instagram, same handle, Off the Couch Boxing and PodScum. And of course, if you're here right now watching, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay tapped in with us and be alerted when new episodes drop. We bring you something new every single week. So get with us. Want to thank the viewers, want to thank the subscribers. Of course, at the end of the day, got to thank the guests. As much of a treat as it is to feast your eyes on me, I know that's not why you're tuning in. You're tuning in for these incredible conversations like the one we just had with JJ French. So I appreciate the guests at the end of the day. Can't do it without them. So appreciate all the support. The channel is doing great. We got lots of great stuff, lots of tricks up my sleeve, trying to run down great guests and put together amazing content for you guys. So continue to stick with us. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys. And until we get together and we do this thing again, this is your boy, Reckless Rex, reminding you to take it easy and keep it sleazy.